Hi, my name is Kevin McDonald, and I'm declaring my independence. Independence from what? Why, negative thoughts and energy, of course. Chief among them, hate, division, and fear. You see, I know that we're all one, and together we can solve any problem, save our planet and each other. Please, join me as we come together as one and choose a better way to be. So now, let's begin with my independence report.
Saying that this is actually Life Between Lives, and what I really like though is we're getting started on time every time now, and people are actually deciding that they can tune in at the time we say that we're going to tune in, and that holds our integrity and it gives them an opportunity to do it right. So, by the way, Natasha Venter and Mr. VisitTheAfterlife.com, Regan Forston is here. Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing good, Kevin.
And I, of course, said I gave you all of 45-second notice as to, for you guys to come up with what we're going to talk about today.
Well, what do you have? What do you think, Natasha?
Well, I am getting that maybe we should talk about something that's going on with my life right now.
Oh, okay.
And it's not necessarily bad or good, but it's that feeling like you're in between this and that, and ways to find your way through when you are feeling, because I know a lot of people in my observation are feeling like either their integrity is being tugged at, or they're feeling kind of like a little bit empty because life just keeps pulling at them and they just don't know how to work through something. Or, it's that finding the purpose of walking forward when we've all kind of gotten beaten up in this last couple years. And even, COVID kind of added on to what we were going through before that. And there's a reason why we go through something. And I know that Mercury is going to be coming up to an end at the end of this week. And when we're going through a planet retrograde, whatever it is, it's about kind of going back over some of our own stories and how are we going to negotiate them differently? How are we going to play with them differently? Like I just did a new moon class and I kind of put in for myself, how can I walk with all the dimensions I walk with in time? Because time is changing. How can I walk with all those dimensions in time at the same time and doing my better good in all of them at the same time? And I know that seems like a big thing, but at the same time, though, that's kind of the reality a lot of us are working through, knowing it or not. And a lot of us are feeling beaten up. We're not getting our buckets filled up. And how can we manage through some of this life walk, this earthly walk, when there's a greater picture of why we're doing it? And maybe, that's a big concept for a half an hour show, but at the same time, maybe we can kind of dance a little bit with that, because I pulled a card, what should we talk about? And it was perception. So how
Protection?
Perception.
How you perceive things is not necessarily how I perceive things.
Yeah.
And with that, and a lot of that is, like I talked about with integrity, a lot of people's integrity is feeling like, where should I stand? Even going back to our presidency changing, that there was some integrity things that we're looking at that, wait a minute, whose integrity should I listen to? Should I find my own integrity? And perception is a lot of that. And so there's just some questions to throw out that, I don't know, Kevin, you always have a great way of placing things into a question to start us off with. But I don't know, Regan, what do you think about some of that?
Kevin's got an idea.
You're so smart, I'm telling you. Well, see, here's the thing that I've learned over the time that I've been doing this, and I'll give you just a really quick example. a while back, I had a young lady that came on the show and spent an hour with her and promoted her business and yada yada yada, and which is what I do a lot of. And so I thought to myself, I need to have this particular service done, and I don't need a complete service. I just need one little thing done. So I emailed this individual, and I said, I need to have this done, just a real quick down and dirty thing. I just need to have it real done because I'm doing something with it. And she said, well, great, that's $500. And in my chest, in my heart, it was like, okay, now hold on. I spent the time, my time, and this is what was rattling around in my head, which was, I spend my time, my energy, my money, and I put something out for you, and you want to charge me retail price for what you're doing? I think that's not fair. So it got my integrity. I didn't feel like she was operating with integrity and all that. And what I'm finding and what I found, Natasha, in my life, in my walk, is that you cannot base what you believe and how you feel on somebody else's integrity or lack thereof, because they're going to act the way that they're going to act anyway. And so you have to be as positive and let it go, because you can't control what stupid things other people do or what things that they do without thinking.
Yeah.
Because if they understood, if the scenario that we're talking about that involves you, if they understood how that was actually impacting you, it wouldn't be happening the way it's happening. Because I think they respect you a great deal.
I would agree. I would agree. And I'm not going to go into the story of what's going on in my life, but I'm just going to say that being the union rep, I have to be a voice for some certain people, and that's about as far as I'm going to go. That, when we're pulling our integrity card, it's one of those things that it really makes us check into our truth.
It does.
And I have an understanding that many of us have worked with other people's truths through most of our lives. And and that's where, when we work with other people's truths, these kinds of things in our lives kind of make us slow down and say, wait a minute. Ooh, here, what's going on? This is hitting me. Oh, this is hitting me in different places of my mind and body. And where can I kind of come up with my own truth? And at the same time, understanding that sometimes we have to look at somebody else's perspective to check in to see if there's something going on that's making them push this button of our integrity. But with Mercury in retrograde right now, I can tell you that some of this story was checking in with what is our truths about how we walk through our life. Are we going to go through the same thing again the same way? Like for me, I had a scenario where I short circuit electronics. Well, I clicked on something and it set my Zoom up to and it was interacting with my friend's Zoom, and it ended up being where I was on to her Zoom. She was on to my Zoom, but we couldn't see each other's Zoom and Zoom accounts and information, but that's where we wanted to go. But I had to end up talking with Zoom to get it done. Well, I figured out that, wait a minute, this is the same story that I had with all my electronics, that I short circuited. And then I go into victimhood. And then I go into. Wait a minute. And then I had to go, wait a minute. I'm not that same person anymore. How can I breathe, walk away, come back, breathe, and navigate it? And so there's a lot of this dance going on of how can we check in with ourselves so we keep our batteries filled, so we keep our life moving forward, because life is going to keep, I don't want to call attacking us, but it's going to keep happening to us so that it can happen for us so we can learn what we're supposed to learn. And it's just keep the ball rolling, because we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
See, as long as there's free will, and I want your input, Regan, as long as there's free will, you're not going to be able to control, for lack of a better term or word, control what anybody else does or how they feel towards you. And so you have to, at one point, just let it go and recognize that we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes, and we're all, it's and just let it go, because you can't control any of it. Regan?
Yeah, a good book for people to get. I don't know if we mentioned this before on the show, but it's called The Four Agreements.
Yeah.
The Four Agreements, right, Natasha? And it's by a Mexican a shaman from Mexico. Don Luis something or other. If you go, she's going to go get a copy right now to show you.
Yes, she is.
I've given my copy away. I'll tell you, there it is. It's the simplest book. And if you make these four agreements, your life will completely turn around. And the one that you're talking about right now, Kevin, the one big one in there, the one big agreement of the four that hits me the most is that when somebody either compliments you or runs you down or whatever, you have to understand that they're coming from a whole different perspective than you are. There it is right there. And so whether they compliment you or run you down, that has nothing to do with who you really are. In other words, that they're just coming from their perspective. So if you just, especially when people run you down, you just have to kind of go, okay, just because they think I'm horrible or did something bad. I mean, I know if I did something horrible or bad, but in a lot of cases you didn't or had no intention to do that, but someone else's opinion of that was that you did. You have to realize they've had a whole different life experience. So what they saw and the way they reacted is coming from something within them. So you just have, and the four agreements is all about having total integrity too. One of the other four agreements is to always do what you say you're going to do. Keep your word. So when you keep your word, you feel comfortable inside. When people are running you down and you realize, they have the right to their own opinion, but that doesn't mean that I have to be who they think, the way they appear me to be, and the other two on there, I used to have them all memorized, but those two are the ones I really remember. What's so you've got them all. You got the whole volumes there.
Yeah, I do. The four agreements is, yes, I know what they are. It's been a while since I read the book, and I integrate a lot of things when I read it. So, the four agreements, my brain's not working right this way.
My former wife told me about the book about 10 years. We're really, really close. She's just the most beautiful soul. And she's not usually into new age things, anything like that. But this was just so common sense. And a friend of hers told her about it. And then she told me about it. And even though I'm a therapist, that was the first I heard about it about 15 years ago.
So it's be impeccable with your word.
Yeah.
Don't take anything personally.
Okay.
Don't make assumptions.
Oh, yes.
Always do your best.
There we go. Oh, boy, the assumptions thing. Oh, man.
That is so hard.
Yeah.
We know what they say about when you assume something, but it makes a fool out of you and me. But at the same time, it's hard as a human being. It's hard not to assume how somebody is thinking when they're directing their anger or their thought process at you.
Yeah. Well, okay. Here's a client that came to me and saying like, oh my God, I did this thing and I think my husband hates me for doing this. I don't know. But, I think he hates me for doing this. And I'm thinking that I need to do this because he did that. And I said, what can you do? And I said, ask your husband, then because, if you just ask, because so many people are afraid in their relationships and they're afraid to ask these things. And then they make assumptions on what they think the other person is thinking, which could be totally off base. And it starts you down a whole rabbit hole of a mess of trouble. I'll share even with you in my first relationship and my first marriage, we went to counseling for on and off for a couple of years, and I figured we still were always going to be married and everything. But I found out in there when we'd be in the couples counseling, she'd be talking about something, and I'm going, oh, wow, I assumed this and I acted this way because I assumed that's what you meant. And then me acting on that assumption, she's not talking to me, and she's thinking that I was doing that for something other reason than what I was doing it for. And it gets this just mess until it just takes, forever to try to unwind it instead of just, finding out. But it's hard for some people in relationships to just, for the person that you love the most, for the person you think it would be the easiest to communicate with, it is sometimes the hardest. And but I learned a lot from that. Because of that, it's, we ended up divorcing because just got to be too crazy. Things got kind of settled down a couple years later, and we thought about getting back together again, but I'd already moved on too far from that. But boy, that was a big lesson in trying to learn to communicate. And when you really want to know something, you just ask the other person,
and I just want to make just a real quick point here that I gave you guys 45 seconds to come up with something, and you came up with 4 agreements. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great. And the thing is, it sold millions of copies, so you can get it used for $3 or $4 on Amazon or something or used if you go to used book something. I've got copies. Matter of fact, I should order another one because I end up giving it away to a client or something, But also these changes, like Natasha, the first thing people need to realize that when you have all this anxiety and all this stuff, it seems too much because you've got so much in turmoil in your life. The anxiety is what it's telling you is that something needs to change. Mm-hmm. And you just have to try to figure out what is it you need to change. And the other thing is that don't feel bad because that's a normal thing everybody goes through at a number of times in their lives. And a lot of times it's a good thing because it means you're at a crossroads. In other words, that the old way of doing things is not working anymore. And spirit is trying to shake you up and trying to get you to look at things differently because you need to have a different mindset to go where you need to go, So don't freak out over it. Just, it's like, it's normal. And then, the ways, I don't know what I do. I guess I usually just, in a sense, meditate, pray or something about it. I try to look at things that aren't working in my life and think, well, if I did this differently, what would that feel like? But the big thing to remember is too, that you can't get to a new state of consciousness without letting go of your old consciousness. In other words, you can't fix the problem with the same consciousness that created it. In other words, so you always have to look at something different. You have to change the way you look at things in order for something to change. Otherwise, it's the same. Like the old saying, you keep on doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep on getting what you've been getting, unless you do something different, But Natasha,
that's basically what I just wrote in my newsletter that I was going to send out was basically, Mercury was trying to teach us, and one of the questions was, am I doing the same thing again that didn't work before? And it's that whole new thing, because I can say that, before a change, usually we're lack of energy, we're feeling down about ourselves, we're feeling down about something, there's all these things that are going on right before change happens. And it's just walking through it. And I know some of us are either the person who's being dragged through the change, or there's the people who are actually the ones that are helping the change happen. And that's where the integrity comes in of helping those things that are supposed to happen with goodness and love and grace, even though you're calling somebody else out about not always making the better choice, but it's how you do it. It's not what you're doing, it's how you do it. And that's the integrity that it takes time to work out. It really takes time. And like for me personally, I had an email that I worked on all weekend because the book said, your words have hold your words with integrity. And every word that I put in there, I had to make sure that it was integrity. So it took me, 2 to 3 days to work on this email to make sure it was in the right integrity.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not the person who's doing wrong. It's the situation that needs to change.
Yeah.
So sometimes we just have to help the people around in the situation move the situation through so it gets to its greater good.
Yeah. Now, I guess this isn't segueing or anything to something else that's similar, but when you're talking about that, you tried to word very carefully the emails that you're doing, because I found that anytime when you have an agenda, you're emailing someone saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry" or something, but you're wording it in such a way that you have an agenda of something that you want to make them change or something, you're going to have to expect that the universe is going to create some sort of comeback, some sort of imbalance or anything like this. I had the perfect example of how, if you do something from total integrity, how beautiful the outcome can be. I was dating a woman from Russia for a while when I was in between marriages and looking for another relationship, and I was falling in love with her. She was beautiful. Because of the language difference. I mean, she spoke English good, but still certain things I would say, she would take as meaning something different in her culture than mine. And she would break up with me, and I'm going, what did I do? I didn't. And I said, okay. A few days later, like a colleague or something at work would say, no, that's not what he meant. This is what he meant. And then she'd call me and go, sorry, we get back together, Well, when we broke up one time, she sent me this email and it had a blah, 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 a lot of bite to it and everything. And I wanted to tell her what I was really feeling, and I didn't want to have an agenda. So I did it from my heart, and I wrote everything I was thinking from a very spiritual, good place about how I felt and being my truth. And I didn't send it right away. I waited until the next morning, and I went over it again. And I went, okay, am I trying to manipulate or change or anything in any way? And I thought, no. And I just felt it was right from my heart. So I pushed send. So I went to sleep, and when I woke up, she had tried to text me like 20 times. And she said, oh my God, you got to call me. So I called her, and she said, when I was reading your email there, did you put an attachment of music to it or something like that? And I said, no. She said, oh, well, then why am I hearing these beautiful sounds of an orchestra when I'm reading your thing? She says, I was hearing all this beautiful music playing, and I clicked the email and I went around my house. I listened outdoors. There's no sound coming or anything. I start to read your thing again. And in my mind, I'm hearing this beautiful heavenly like music or something. And so I told her, I said, well, that's just, it's because I was just coming from this space of total love and not having any agenda. Somehow the universe, when she's reading this thing, she's hearing beautiful music as she's reading it. So that was interesting,
Oh yeah. By the way, Regan, you've got some pretty profound things that you're saying today. Have you thought about becoming, I don't know, like a therapist or something?
I might, man. Well, I had a client this week that was very interesting. Very, very serious. Oh, she's just an angel. She's one of these clients. I just hope that I can be of help to her, because she's only 23 years old, and she's been assaulted or raped about 8 times so far in her life.
Oh God!
And she's in the military. She's in the military, and I was learning all this inside stuff from the military, and she was saying, that they had that big scandal, Hook a few years ago, where a lot of these guys, were raping women and stuff in the military. She says that's just the tip of the iceberg. We all know. It says it's just rampant throughout the military. And she says it's the good old boys club. It's usually from the supervisors that think they have power over the women. And she says she knows most of her, the other women that she knows have to deal with this on a constant basis. She says there's women that disappear and are never seen again on these bases, and it's all covered up and everything. So I said, okay, your 4 years is up. How about getting another job? She says, no. She says, I'm going to stick with it. She says, I put in for officer school. So she's going to go to school, and then she'll come back in as a lieutenant, in her second thing. She says, I want to help other women that are coming up in the thing to mentor them and to try to help make some change in the military. And I thought, what a brave soul she is, because she's, what she's up against. And again, it's this good old boys club, like in the police and and anybody of power, well, we all know there's with the Me Too movement and everything, you know. So so
Right.
she's up against right now, like you're talking about making changes. She has to decide, do I get out and take a safe job somewhere? Or am I one of those brave persons that wants to make a difference? And am I going to put myself out there to help other people and to be of service, you know, even though I know it's going to be very difficult for me, you know?
You know, Veronica, one of our listeners, just chimed in with a couple things. First of all, she said, "Are you getting this?" I'm not sure who she's asking who's getting it. They're like, one of us apparently needs this message. And the second thing is, she said, things need to change. Yeah, I know, but I get exhausted just thinking about it.
Thinking about change?
Thinking about change. Yeah.
And I think that's like for me this weekend, I was kind of feeling like Kevin and I were talking before this, my bucket was a little empty because I feel like I'm in the pivot of helping about 3 changes going on. and it's my integrity that has to stand quietly firm. And I'm saying the word quietly firm because everywhere that I'm navigating with is there's more pieces to the puzzle than just one person. And so when you know that things have to change and you know that you're part of the keg and the wheel, or the, you know, it's like these big old clocks where you have the different cogs that go around and around, and you know you're one of them, and if you keep it working and you can make a difference in the other cogs. And if you make a point, sometimes the cog stops, but stops everything else, and they have to look. But when they look at you, you have to show who you are. You have to truly show who you are and that integrity. And you have to make sure that you have that integrity when you are looked at, because a lot of times it's not the person that you're trying to change. It's the situation, and it's the people around in that situation that have to take a different perspective to change the bigger thing. And when you're in that moment, you know, like I tried to navigate through, you know, like doing the email, doing the things that I was doing during the day. But at night, I tried to read a better book. I tried to give myself time off because it can be daunting to know that we're all in this cusps, or whatever you want to call it, on the edge of these big changes going on. And all we can try to do is be. You know, try to be the better us. Try to hold the integrity. Try to hold our higher self to a greater calling within the reason that we're all human doing the work. And so giving ourselves grace while we're walking through it. And just know that it's okay if we kind of, like there was a couple times where I just sat down and started playing solitaire because I needed a time out from walking the path of helping change.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I have people on the other side, when they do the life between lives or the past life regression thing, the thing that's good about that, and for people to realize, even if they don't do something like that, is they are down here for a reason and they came down to learn something. Mm-hmm. So if you're having difficulties, think of that first. Like it's just like if you all of a sudden, I found myself in college taking a trigonometry course or something, which I know nothing about, even though I said that word. I had it in high school for a little while, and I didn't do very good. I'm never really good at math. But if that's put on my plate, or let's say you have it's your work, all of a sudden the boss gives you a new skill that you don't really have any way of knowing about it, and you're all panicked, how am I going to change or anything there? You realize that your boss put it on your desk because he wants you to learn that, because you need to learn that to be what you need for your job. And so then, you know, you just, you know, say, okay, what's step number 1? And then you go to step number 2. And pretty soon you know how to do it. And you're glad your boss made you do that because now you've got a new skill. So a new skill could be patience, could be compassion. You know, some of us don't have those skills, or we don't have them. We don't have them to the degree that we want. And I found that, like, I always thought I was an honest person, even in my in the 1970s and 80s in business. And then as I started growing spiritually, all of a sudden I found out that integrity that I thought was really, really good, instead of it being an A, I look at it and it was like a B or a C. And so you realize that the integrity at this level, that even that I am now, and I hope it's pretty high integrity, But as I raise my consciousness, that integrity's got to come with it. You can't use an old integrity with a new state of consciousness. Yeah. So that means you end up having to be even more honest and more patient and more kind. You know, it's got to step it up.
And you got to, but when you're talking about integrity, you have to be careful, because sometimes if you bring a certain belief forward and you believe that you are working from a place of integrity, and so you bring this belief into your world because of you believe that you've got a lot of integrity, so therefore this belief has a lot of integrity. I have a friend who's a Trump supporter, and he believed that he was operating from a place of integrity to be a Trump supporter, and I could not convince him, no matter what, that he was not operating from that place. You got to be a little bit careful about throwing these words around of perception and integrity and right and wrong and all that kind of stuff, because it's kind of subjective. There's another word.
Yeah. The good thing is he was coming from what he thought was integrity. Right. But then when new information comes in, the biggest thing is you have to be willing to see if you were wrong and to change. You know,
but then you have to admit that you're wrong. And that's another thing that us humans have a problem.
That's hard.
With. Yeah.
Yeah.
We lost Natasha.
There we are. Sorry, I was playing with my mic thing. That, you know, when I do something, when I have a conversation with even my husband, when I have conversation with my friend, I always try to stand in the middle. I try to stand with one foot in their shoes and one foot in my shoes, so that I can get another perspective, so that when I'm talking about something, it's like, okay, there's two sides of the story. Let's try to find the middle. And I even do this with the kids on the playground. You know, they'll come up to me, well, she did this, well, he did that, or she did that and she did that, or he did this and he did that. And I go, okay, so it sounds like you both did something. How can we come to a center where you change a little bit of what you were doing and you change a little bit of what you're doing, so that we can have and be friendly to each other? We don't have to be friends, but we can be friendly to each other. So let's try to be friendly. What can you do differently? And somebody will label something. I go, I like that idea. Do you like that idea? And then I say, what can you do? And then they say, and then, you like that idea? Okay, so now we can be a little more friendly, right? Now go play. You know, because I'm watching 60 other kids, so I can't spend a whole lot of time doing this, but I can still help them process through this interaction. Sometimes it takes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter, what it is. But, you know, when we can take a perspective and say, okay, there's something that they're going on, there's something that's going on with me, how can we come to more of a center consciousness of saying there can be a little bit of grace with everybody. There can be a little bit of understanding for the situation. Because sometimes we do have to let go of their perspective because they grew up in this kind of household or that kind of situation. And, you know, that perspective of that situation over there. And we can just kind of come to more of a, okay, this is for the greater picture. How can we help the greater picture move forward?
Yeah.
And that's not always easy, but there again is that word of, it's not about self-integrity. Well, it is about self-integrity. I'm going to try to do this better. But it's also about integrity of, I always go with the integrity of, how can I create love into the situation? How can I create a lovingness into the situation? How can I find grace for those around me in this situation? And how can I be maybe a little bit upset about the situation, but at the same time, how can I help it move forward after I get through that human emotion for a few minutes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think really you're going to get anywhere as far as making the best decisions unless you walk in the other person's shoes a little bit.
Yes.
You know, and that's what our government needs to do right now with this bipartisan thing. We need to look at, you know, not just because you're you know, one clan or another clan. You know, you got to look at the opposing viewpoint and have to really think about it and take the good with that. And both sides do that. And that's why most of the time in government, when they make a decision, it's rarely, it's more times than not, it's some sort of compromise between the two positions, instead of just, my way or the highway, kind of thing. You're not going to get anywhere doing that. I was just reading about the Keystone Pipeline today, and because I was reading the pros and cons, and when I looked at one side and I went, well, they got a pretty good idea. We got to keep people to work, and it's supposed to help us to bring our gas prices down and everything. And then I read on the other side, and I go, they've already had 4 or 5 leaks in that pipeline since they started it, and some pretty bad oents, and most of the oil is going to be going to other countries. It's not going to be going here. And then, once the pipeline's done, this type of crude is so different than the regular kind. It's way more corrosive. And if there's a spill, it's really, really a lot harder to clean it up and everything. So, it's like Biden's going to, he's going to have to look at both sides. And to me, of course, that's just my viewpoint now. I'm thinking he's got to look ahead 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, because this oil thing is going to be phased out. We're going to have better ways of doing things. And we can all see that. And the old way is fighting like crazy, for the status quo. But, sure, it'll save some jobs now. But what about if it ruins some of the environment? And we're not getting that once it's all said and done. And everybody but us is getting something good out of it. It's not an easy thing to decide,
It's interesting because you're right in that years ago, they were talking about, and this goes back to the time of the oil embargo of the late 70s.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the fact that, the United States has got an abundance of oil, but it's all in the shale stuff. And it's too expensive to extract the shale to get the oil out of the shale, so it won't work until the price of oil went up enough to where the cost of fracking became down enough, and the technology married enough to where it's now pretty much the same. And now we have an abundance of oil, which we need to not use. And so that's here's my prediction. For the future is that as the cost of renewables comes down and the jobs that are created by renewable energy goes up, then the oil there's going to be a natural evolution of, we don't need to use the oil. It's bad for the environment. It makes us it's toxic, and so it's by virtue of that it's going to go away, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I think when I was reading about the electric cars now, it seems like within 20 years, which I think GM or something says they're not even going to make gas cars anymore. They're converting to all electric, and everything gets better. So just think of that, if all the gas we won't need, if 80% of the country is driving with electric cars now. Of course, you still need gas. You still need oil to produce electricity in a way that we get it, but it's still, we're not.
You still need oil for the joints. You still need oil for a lot of things. Like they were saying, these big windmills. Well, you need the oils and the greases to keep it moving. But the thing is, though, it's about finding a greater balance. We may still need oils, but do we need to be so heavily oiled country?
Right.
Do we need, because now with all these batteries, we're changing our landfills, so it's like there's this kind of, every time we have a change, there's a ripple effect. And how can we have a gentler ripple effect? Well, it's about finding the balance more in the middle, that we gotta, we've been a certain way because of the simplicity of our land. When cars were made, look at how simple. We didn't have computers. We didn't have a lot of this this stuff going on. We still had politics. We still had, things that need to be done. We still had illnesses. We still had all these, fear-loving countries and fear-loving this and fear-loving that. But yet at the same time, though, we didn't have if you wanted to read a book, you had to do it sometimes by, candlelight or by something. It wasn't like we had all these different lights that we can turn on. And so with that, that whenever we're making a step in life, it's wise for us to go, okay, if I send the send button, what ripple effect can I make? Is it within good integrity and love attached to it? Or is it going to be something that's going to cause an ouch to someone? And that's that kind of that moral values that we're kind of having to wake up to a little bit. And I'm hoping that with what we've gone through in this country the last couple of years is figuring out that what really sounds good to our ears and what doesn't. What sounds good to our hearts that doesn't, what sounds good to our souls that doesn't anymore. And there's the people that are seeing the light are the ones that are going to try to help us walk through that light.
Yeah.
And that would be good if that was you.
I'm actually knowing that it's partly that that's part of that work I was doing this weekend is listening to the call. I was listening to the call.
I'll probably recommend it on and off. It was just good for me. Was it's called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, and it's the man who wrote the book interviewed all of these very spiritual, these gurus, these monks that would go into caves for years at a time and meditate and have these amazing spiritual experiences in the other worlds and the God worlds and with the angels and everything. And then they would come out of their cave and have to come back to real life for a while. And they couldn't even balance their checkbook. They couldn't get along with their mother or their father. They couldn't, and it's just all about, like, even the people like for me or like Natasha, we seem to have a kind of, good close connection to the other side. And so some people would look at us and say, well, I guess they don't have any problems anymore. I guess life's easy for them.
Yeah.
And then you realize, no, but the thing is, we have the same problems everybody else has, but because we have that connection and we're trying to help other people have that connection, is we solve the problems a little bit easier, and we get back on moving the wagon forward a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of staying down in the mud for a long time, we get right back up on and start moving forward. Like that Rumi poem about, it shows Rumi is their teacher, and he's got this wagon full of people, and he's going over these big bumps in the road, and some of them fall off into the mud. And he just turns around, sees them in the mud, and he says, "Come on, get back on, And some people just stay in the mud, and he gets really far beyond them, And then he realizes pretty soon as people awaken, they keep falling off into the mud, but they get off real quick and jump right back on the wagon and move forward, And that's the gist of the poem. But that meant a lot to me, with me realizing that, I get out of the mud a lot faster now than I used to.
And there's some people who just like being in the mud.
You're darn right. Yeah, some people, they won't, like, I could help them with their issues, but they want to stay in the mud,
And that's and those people, you just bless them and let them go, right? Let them do what they're going to do.
And that's where for me, I always kind of look at that everything in my life has a payoff. So if I want to be a victim of it, it has a payoff. Example, like even with my ankle this summer when I had it where I was putting it up, I started getting into that. Ooh, I kind of like being not able to walk. I kind of like my husband having to do the cooking and that kind of stuff. And I had to decide, am I going to stay a victim of this situation? Is my ankle going to stay hurt for a very long time? Or if I'm just going to be healed and navigate through it? And, everything has a payoff. That even somebody being angry gets a payoff. And so what is that payoff? Well, sometimes when somebody's always angry, people kind of start going, shh, we don't want to get them angry. So everybody does what they want to do, and that's the payoff. Somebody whines and cries all the time. Well, they get attention, and, my father-in-law even said one time, why do you say good job to a kid when he's doing a good job? I said, because I want him to know that he can do good and he can do bad. Either way, he gets talked to. It's like, there's a payoff, and we have to really ask ourselves, what is my payoff if I'm going through this? And what is this here to teach me?
So what was his point as to why wouldn't you if a kid is doing a good thing, why wouldn't you tell him he's doing a good thing?
I'm just going to say my father-in-law lovingly said came from a military, Lutheran, Midwestern, farmland in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Oh, he could have met my mom. She was born of the same ilk. She wasn't in the military. But her attitude was, I'm not going to compliment them because I don't want them to get a big head.
Interesting. I'll tell you a story, a true story that I heard in therapy school. And you know, Smucker's jams and jellies?
Love them. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the woman who invented that, she was in a family. She was either the 8th, 10th, 12th, 13th child. She was the lowest on the totem pole. Her mom had lots and lots of kids. And when she was young, the only time she ever got any attention from her mother was when she was sick. So psychologically, her whole life she spent being one sickness and everything after another, because at an early age, her subconscious says, well, the only way to get attention from people and to have them show you some affection is to be sick, and then they have to wait on you and everything. So I think she got better finally when she finally realized that, but that's what she carried into adulthood. So sometimes I have clients that they have these issues and they talk, I want to be this way and I want to be better and everything like that. But then when it gets right down to it, they don't want to give up that problem because of it. Well, we call that in psychological terms, secondary gain. In other words, they're gaining something from their dysfunction or from their illness or something. So they have, and a lot of times they're not conscious of it. And they'll say, no, I'm not. I want to get better. I want to get better. But then when it really comes down to it, they don't, you know. I had one PTS. I was starting to work with a veteran who had severe PTSD. And after just about 15 minutes in each session, he would just quit. And then he said, no, I don't want to go anymore. And so, and I found, he said, look, I'm just giving this up altogether because I just realized, you know, if I get to be sane, I'm not going to get my $3,000 from the government every month anymore. So, and I don't want to go back to work. So I'm just going to stay the way I am, you know, because that secondary gain was that big check coming in every month, you know, so he had to keep himself crazy. I don't know, for an extra $3,000 a month, maybe I could stay a little crazy too.
Well, there is something to say for it. At least you can pretend. You can pretend that you're.
Well, and sometimes people that are alcoholics, their boyfriend or girlfriend, they seem to choose other alcoholics because then they can just, you know, be in the same thing together. And you'll find sometimes that when one decides to get better, the other one fights like crazy to keep them, to help to sabotage them so they don't get better, you know. And then sometimes they'll quit therapy because they don't want to lose their partner who's an alcoholic who doesn't want them to get better, because that means they feel they have to get better, you know.
There was another bus driver that was really heavy. And he drank a bunch of Diet Coke every day and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, he was like 400 pounds. And he decided that he was going to have the surgery. While he was heavy, he also married a heavy gal. So they were both heavy together. And so he finally decided to have the bypass surgery. He lost 200 pounds and they got a divorce.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't work anymore, because they couldn't revel in the same box of Oreos.
Yeah. And sadly, that's the, you know, we think, oh, we just do this and get better. But human beings being human beings, it's, you know, it's not easy.
No, it's the ripple effect. You know, it's like if you're putting the microscope on somebody else, you have to understand that microscope is going to be back on you. You know, it's always going to be when somebody brings attention to a situation, you have to make sure you're towing the line and doing the work too. And that's what's so hard for people. And I can have that understanding. I'm human too. That sometimes I've asked myself, do I really want my life to be harder than it is? Well, yeah, because this calling is so strong. You know, the soul calling in me is so strong that I want to be here. You know, doing these Monday and Wednesday situations are a blessing to me because it's my calling that's wanting to do this. And that's where we have to decide right now. This is our time to wake up and say, what is our soul wanting us to do? And do we want to do the work to get there? It is about, and I want to say that there's a difference in responsibility. A lot of people say, oh, well, if I do this, that means I'm responsible for that. Well, like I was having a conversation with one of my friends that, he was saying that I know I can be successful. And I go, okay. And he goes, but there's a part of me that wants to stop. And I said, well, that's the part of you that knows that it can be responsible for that. It's that perception of what being doing really good is about. It's like a lot of times in society, well, I'm a millionaire, so I have to buy a Porsche. Well, you don't have to buy a Porsche. Heck, 60s Ford pickup could be your Porsche. It doesn't have to be anything. You don't have to buy a bigger house. If you have this success, if you have that inner calling to do, and you get successful about being in your life, you don't have to have the persona what everybody else says you should have. You can do what makes you happy. And that's where people need to kind of start finding, what does success look for me? What does that feeling good looks for me? Do I have the payoff? Do I like the payoff? Do I like having the payoff of being angry? Well, sometimes that inner, heartache, when you're angry and your heart's getting worse, and you find out when you go to the doctor that you have a heart problem because you've been angry so much and your heart's ready to explode because you've blown it up so many times. There's those kind of payoffs that we kind of really have to look. Are they truly healthy for us? And, there's the wisdom that comes from this that I always go, what is this here to teach me? That's one of the first things I say. And, like Kevin last week when we talked about something that happened on Wednesday, and this weekend was what I was dealing with. Even when I was talking to you, I knew right when it was happening to me during that meeting, I was asking myself, what is this here to teach me? Why is this happening? Where am I supposed to take this? What am I supposed to do with it? Am I supposed to put it in a bag that I'm responsible for? Am I supposed to pass it on to somebody else who can do better with it? Is there something else? And so with that as we're walking through something, check in to see, what is my role? Sometimes we need to be in the passenger seat and let somebody else take lead. Because not all of us have the strength or the knowledge to do what we're supposed to do, but it's that trust that we can be part of the greater good of light.
Yeah. Well, this thing that we started out with, Natasha, about trying to figure out what to do when things are a mess. I think, I like practical things to do sometimes. So what I give my clients to do is I say, okay, get a notepad. And I say, just, on paper, just, what's one or two things that you think if you change, if these circumstances changed in your life, that you would feel happy, And so they write down the two things, and then you say, okay, maybe the first thing is they go, I never have enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month. And it's driving me crazy because I'm always $50 short and whatever. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, well, the solution, then you think, okay, let's just write down what are the solutions. Of course, the obvious one comes up is, okay, find a better job. But then they go, well, I can't, blah, blah, blah. It says, well, is there some sort of education you could get, or is there some other skill you could learn that might take a little time, but if you did that, you could get a better job, And sometimes it's like, get a second job, okay. And then they have to think, okay, I want to get a second job. And then they go to the next step and go, what do I have to do to get that second job? And then okay, I got to redo my resume. Then I've got to set a thing and where I'm going to go 3 or 4 times a week. I'm going to go on the internet and send my resume out. There's all these little things. So I find that once people realize what they have to do, even though they don't want to do it, but they can see what they have to do, a lot of that anxiety goes away, because a lot of it's just caused by, I don't know what I'm doing. And so just by doing practical things like figuring out what you want to change and then writing down the things that have to be done and then putting it on a timetable. In other words, putting it on a timetable. Okay, I'm going to have my new business cards done by this time. I'm going to have my resume done by so-and-so. And then they just start with number one. That's not overwhelming. The first thing, just start with it. And I found out that from the other side, they say once they see you moving forward and you're not stuck, they'll kind of help guide you along. Some things will happen. Either little miracles will happen, or you'll feel good and you'll go to the next step and the next step. But when we're just stuck, they're not going to come and pull us out of that stuckness. We have to at least walk the first step. And once we get started, then where's that old saying, God helps those who help themselves, Anyway, and that's really, really true,
Well,
So-
our higher power will give us a hand, but we have to have the hand reach up and grab it.
Right.
Without that unionship, how are they supposed to say, here we go? And I know that every time that I had a question about something, when I said, what is this here to teach me? Usually I found the answer to that pretty quickly within a week or two of what is this here to teach me? And sometimes it would be just walking by and hearing somebody say something, like one time I had a teacher supervisor that and I was the only para that can work with her. Nobody else wanted to work with her. And I was walking by my other teacher supervisor, and she said, my supervisor said, it's time for you to have professional boundaries. And I went, that's what this is about. I'm supposed to have professional boundaries in my life. Okay. Because even with my husband, even with my friends, because I want to be able to work with these people later. So how do I interact with them? And it is about saying, no, I can't. But you know what? I so love you, and I'll do it with you tomorrow. It's that professional boundary to say what we need. And it is about working and walking forward. And every time that we stop and go, we can do that for a little bit because we're human. But after we do this, it's time for us to go, I did a practice one time, and I've done it a couple of times, is I kind of check in, like for one thing. I had somebody who I was going to have a hard time working with, and I wrote down different reasons why I didn't want to work with this person. Well, I picked the two things that were the stronger, and I checked in. Well, why does that trigger me? Oh, the voice triggers me. Well, why does the voice trigger me? So I would name a couple other reasons why the voice would trigger me. And then I would name, then the voice triggers me because of the sound wave, because of the way she talks to me. There's different things. And so I'd pick that one. Well, why does it bother me that the way she talks to me? So it would kind of lead off into different places. Well, it came down to where it's like, oh, I may have to show her who I am. And I don't want to do that. Why don't I want to do that? Because that means being vulnerable. And being at work, this was the phase when I was starting to come out. I felt like actually I can understand why people of gay, transgender have a hard time coming out, because I kind of was doing the same thing with myself, being intuitive. That my coworkers were starting to find out that I was somebody who wasn't just somebody who was working in school, and so with that key of me coming out was the key to the beginning of my life as I know it now.
Yep, of course. That's how it goes. That's how it works. And you got to put yourself out there and follow your heart. And as my old saying goes, your heart is free. Have the courage to follow it. Natasha, somebody wants to get a hold of you. How do they do that?
You can reach me at angelicclarifications.com, or you can email me at natasha@angelicclarifications.com.
Regan.
Okay, it's right there on the screen. Visit theafterlife.com. There's all kinds of videos on there for traditional therapy and the spiritual therapy, for depending on what a person's which way they lean. But I just tell everybody out there, especially I can help anybody anywhere in the world on Zoom with traditional therapy. The skills that I teach, the EFT, the self-hypnosis and everything, are pretty much a 1-2 punch to any problem you have. But sometimes just having some person that won't judge you, that you can talk to, and it'll just kind of help you through your issue that you can talk to, works really, really good. So I'm available on Zoom or in person pretty much anywhere in California, because I go to the different cities in California throughout the month. So anyway, you can reach me at visittheafterlife.com. There's a free book on there. right now you can get about reincarnation is real if you have that little spiritual side, or watch the videos on the Life Between Lives thing, because you can actually now, in a deep state of relaxation, you can visit heaven and spend a few hours there, get answers to your question, get some counseling from people on the other side, and come back. And almost everybody can do it. It's easy.
Very nice. So, Natasha, the floor is yours. What would you like to tell our audience today?
That as we walk through life and our buckets are feeling empty and life is really triggering us, try to find that place in you that says, why am I doing this? And a lot of times that brings the light to us through those moments to get us to where we're going. We all are going through something, and just trust that there's a part of you that is willing to go there and let it lead you, because sometimes there's the rest of us is kind of going, oh, that's just too much work, but it's worth it in the end. And I can tell you from my life history that every time that I came up against that wall and wondered where I was supposed to go where I was supposed to go, that every time I was willing to walk through that wall, because the wall was only what I perceived, that as I walked through that wall, the greater good happened. And a lot of people came back to me and said, thank you. So trust that greater picture, because that wall is only self-perceived.
Yeah.
Regan?
Same. I just want to ditto what Natasha says. It's when all the times I've been through this crazy feeling, I knew something needed to change. I finally get off my butt and do something. And then after it's all said and done, I would never even want to go back to that person I was, a few weeks before, because there's such it's worth the, it's like getting your degree in college. You finally get it and you go, wow, that was worth all of those hours of tests and going to school and working 2 jobs and everything. It's all worth it. So if you're going to be lazy, just enjoy yourself being miserable.
Well, what do you do? What do you do?
Well, not everybody's supposed to be the world changers. Not
True.
Everybody is. Some of us are meant to be the person who's on $3,000 a month and a little bit, because, like for me, at any point in time, I could have said stop.
Yeah.
And I could have just done my job at school and come home and cook dinner. But that wasn't very fulfilling. That was not fulfilling at all. Yeah. This person I am today is very fulfilling, and that's what I love. So
yeah, just take one. Whoever's listening out there or sees us in the future, things are a mess. Just do one thing right now this week that'll move you a little bit forward, and watch how that multiplies into a whole bunch of steps.
Mm-hmm. And the other interesting thing about your friend that was on $3,000 disability, he gained the ultimate freedom. He could then do whatever he chose to do, because the financial burden had been lifted from him. So he could take that and do whatever he chose to do. That's why I had my arm break and my other arm break, so that I have the freedom to do whatever I choose to do. It's really freeing, I have to tell you.
The restriction you had was very freeing.
You have relatives or friends that are stuck, and you just want to tell them to get over it. That you can't change them. They have to get to their low, or they have to get to their bottom first before they do something. You just have to be patient with them and love them. And hopefully you can reach out and say, I want to help you if I can. But if they don't reach back, don't take it personal. They're just, they just got a little further down the rabbit hole they have to go before they make a change.
Exactly. And Natasha, thank you so much for being here today. It's always fun. Regan, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
It's always a great time. And just remember, listen to the gospel according to Paul, and just let it be.
Hey, and thanks for listening to this episode all the way to the end. Hey, pretty cool. Hey, don't forget to follow us so you can receive regular updates and new posts. And remember, take care of each other, because each other's all we've got. See you next time on My Independence Report.